letting him do something so tasteless.
Don't upset yourself, darling. It's only a bloody movie.
More anger! More!
You're married to a man obsessed by murder.
This will not be released in this country.
Show me some damn footage now!
I'm under extraordinary pressures on this picture, and the least you can do is give me your full support.
We've mortgaged our house. I am your wife. I celebrate with you when the reviews are good. I cry for you when they are bad. And I put up with those people who look through me as if I were invisible, because all they can see is the great and glorious genius Alfred Hitchcock.
How does it end?
I promised Mother I wouldn't tell.
Oh, you imp, you've got nudity in there.
Well, her breasts were rather large. It was a challenge not to show them.
And so with that said, Liz, what did you think of Hitchcock?
You know, I watched it with a discerning eye because I'm a little bit biased. I have a disclaimer because I'm a little biased going in because I'm potentially working with one of the actors who's in the movie Hitchcock, and his name is Richard Portnow, and he plays Barney Balaban.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of the time watching the movie, like really being super hypercritical of Richard Portnow and not really putting my critical eye on the whole film as I should have been. So I have like vague critical responses to the film. And those are that I felt it was a decent film, but I felt like it lacked energy, and I did not feel a sense of suspense because I knew that the film was going to be, like, I knew that the whole film was about making Psycho. I knew the film Psycho would be a success, so I didn't have any worries about any of the conflicts or any of the, how do I put it? Any of the drama in the film revolves around making the film, and I knew that they'd succeed. So I felt like it lacked a little bit of energy in that aspect.
All right. I agree with you to an extent. I agree with you that, yeah, obviously you know what's going to happen. Well, I mean, ideally you'd already know that Psycho is going to be a success. So there's a lack of urgency, I guess, or stakes in whether or not this is going to all work out.
Right.
But what because I did like the movie overall, what I appreciate about it is I think it's these performances, specifically from Anthony Hopkins and Helen Mirren, just because the film, I know a lot about Psycho. It's the movie I'd name my favorite horror movie if asked offhand, and I know a lot about the making of Psycho. I know a lot about Hitchcock. I'm a big Hitchcock fan. So I know a lot of the facts that this movie tries to present already, and I'm aware that a lot of them aren't really true, or at least the way they handle them. So knowing that and seeing how they're more or less kind of cheekily pointing out things that are like, you know, myths about the making of Psycho or what have you, as opposed to actually representing the making of Psycho.
Right.
I feel like I can see how that could ruin the movies for certain people that are, you know, that are similarly very inclined to know a lot about Hitchcock and Psycho already. But I was happier with seeing Anthony Hopkins and Helen Mirren just have these kind of fun performances in this film that's kind of revisionist history about the making of Psycho.
Oh, I completely am on your side with that. I mean, I thought the performances were pretty great for the most part. I did feel a little wink with every performance. Like, I thought Scarlett Johansson was perfect as Janet Leigh. I never would have thought of it. Like, I loved her. But then, even as much as I loved her and thought she was perfect and knocked it out of the park, I couldn't help but think it was an homage, and it wasn't really, you know, from the ground up a performance. And the same thing goes with Anthony Hopkins, and the same thing goes with, I forgot the wonderful actor who plays Tony Perkins.
James Darcy, who was it?
And these are all fantastic actors, and but I felt like it was a little wink, whereas Helen Mirren, her performance to me was the only completely creative, you know, actress taking on the role and really making it her own. I don't think that she didn't feel censored from the stigma attached to the public persona, because I don't think a lot of people know about Alma Revelle.
I see, and that's why I agree with you that I think Helen Mirren does the best among this very large ensemble cast. And but I also think it's because Alma, opposed to Hitchcock, who's a very eccentric personality, like, people know who Hitchcock is and they know how he is and how he acts, and what have you. I don't think people know Alma as much to be able to recognize how close to the character Helen Mirren is in terms of creating a performance versus imitating the person she's representing.
Yeah, she had a lot of freedom, and I thought that that freedom gave, yes, I mean, absolutely. I think the other performances were fantastic, but because of the subject matter and because of the script, they were a little bit chained to these impersonations at times, which is difficult, and it's not the actor's fault and it's not the director's fault. It's really the fact that these are people in the public eye, and audiences are going to bring their own expectations to those performances regardless. So it's like, this is not even like a criticism. It's more like, oh, gee golly, that's annoying, but it was still a good performance.
I can say that with some, like, Anthony Hopkins, I think he does do a good enough job of, not good enough, I think he does a very good job of both portraying Hitchcock as we know him, but also bringing in his own kind of qualities to the role that make it seem less of a dead-on imitation of Hitchcock and more of a, in the way he kind of, in the way like, what's his name, Frank Langella did like Nixon and Frost Nixon. I think it's like, I think there's enough of a balance between the actor and the person that they're representing, I guess.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up Nixon, because I just saw the Oliver Stone Nixon with Anthony Hopkins.
I didn't even first time Anthony Hopkins playing that same character.
And I was like blown away by that performance. I mean, that was just astounding, because I think of Anthony Hopkins, I think of Remains of the Day, I think of Silence of the Lambs, I think there's no way this guy who looks nothing like Nixon could play Nixon, and he did, and he was astounding. And I thought the same obsessive traits and paranoid traits that Nixon had, that Anthony Hopkins did so well portraying in the movie Nixon, I thought it brought it to Hitchcock, and I thought that was successful in terms of what you're saying as having a more rounded character and bringing kind of unusual characteristics to the role of Alfred Hitchcock.
You said well-rounded, and, Hitchcock's... Anyway, as far as some of the other performances go, like, I do like Scarlett Johansson in this role, which is, this is a good year for Scarlett Johansson, because I generally don't really care for her that much, but I really liked her in The Avengers, and I really liked her here, too. Like, she brings a warmth and charisma to her performance, as opposed to, not having those things, which is what I feel like I've been witness to in other years involving her in many roles. But, with that, there's also, you brought up, James Darcy as Tony Perkins. Him and, even like Kurtwood Smith and even Richard Morton to an extent, like, with Anthony Perkins, it feels like he's being played almost as a joke, because of, he's, is it rumored, or they know that he's like homosexual in the movie, like the way
Right.
he almost feels like his character's there to serve a joke gag, like that's what it feels like. And that was a little, as much as he does seem to be doing like a dead-on Anthony Perkins imitation, it feels like he's just there for one reason, to like fuel a couple jokes that the movie had to play on this character, which is a little unfortunate, but like not too much to take me out of the film.
Right. You're talking about the bedroom scene, right?
Yeah.
Like the peeking top scene.
Yeah. There's like a couple lines he has where it's like, okay, that's funny, I guess. And then like Kurtwood Smith and Richard Portnow, like Portnow, I think is actually good. I like him in the role of the producer, but they are like the antagonists of the film, and like it's fortunate that this movie isn't trying to be so much the making of Psycho as it is about the relationship between Alma and Hitchcock, because by painting these two people as like the antagonists of the film, if it really focused on that, it would again go to how the film doesn't really have so high stakes, because we know everything's going to work out. So you're just having these two people represent antagonists that are going to lose, and are serving one purpose only. So
Right, I'm not scared of Richard Portnow at all, and like, I met him, and he can be a very intimidating guy, and like when in every scene that he's in, he has that booming voice and an intense stare down, and in all those scenes, I feel like those scenes lost gravity, because the studio is going to make a lot of money, and there's nothing for him to worry about.
And let's see, what did you think of the Ed Gein aspect of this film?
That was cool. That was the part I loved the most, actually, because so often Hollywood films and studio films, not that this is in any way, I mean, there's no barrier between studio and independent anymore, but not that this is the prototypical studio film, but so many mainstream films make excuses for fantasy sequences, and this film just had Ed Gein just pop up whenever it wanted to, and never really truly explained why he was there. And I love that. It was nice to have something a little bit vague in a film that seems so clear-cut at times.
And to kind of delve into people that may not have seen the movie, the Ed Gein role, Ed Gein is he's a famous murderer who led on to the inspiration of the book that Psycho is based on, as well as others, including like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that film, and Silence of the Lambs, like that. Ed Gein's inspired various serial killer people in fictional media, and so at the beginning of the film, we do see Ed Gein, and played by Michael Wincott, and he kind of factors into Hitch's kind of subconscious. He kind of becomes this kind of fantasy figure that he deals with as not necessarily a conscious, but as a person he can talk to or have nightmares with at the same time. So it's a weird kind of, it's an interesting little thing to add on. I liked it too. I thought it was kind of a neat little quirk to the film that is otherwise somewhat straightforward, but at the same time, that's another thing I liked about the film. It feels less like it's certainly not a biopic. It's more of just a study of one time in history, regardless of how true to history it is. But it feels like Ed Wood was one of my biggest kind of comparisons because of the tone of that movie. This movie's a lot of fun. That's something I have.
Okay, yeah, I can see that, definitely.
I feel like this movie, it's less trying to be a stodgy drama, even though it does involve the perils of managing a relationship. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and it's because of, the performances, which some of them are a little more comical in nature, just kind of wink in terms of how they're being portrayed by the actors. But it's a fun movie. I don't think it ever really gets bogged down in the drama too much necessarily.
Yeah, I think what you enjoy the most is what frustrates me the most, and that's because, we both know a lot about Hitchcock, and I wanted some muckraking. I wanted to see a side of Hitchcock that was truly unattractive or, shocking, or I just wanted to see something new about him. And I think there's more to the phrase I used on Just Seeing It was like more depths to plunge. I don't even know if that's grammatically correct, but I think that there's more to explore with Hitchcock than this film did, and instead it took a more entertainment light route. And that works for some people, and personally I was expecting something different, so it didn't work as well for me.
I can say that. Did you see the Girl by chance? The HBO?
I was just told that film takes the direction that I was looking for.
It does, but at the same time, it's not a really enjoyable film. I didn't think it was very good. Like, I think Toby Jones he's good as Hitchcock, and he falls into another position where he's playing the same character as someone else is playing in the same year, which he did with Infamous and Capote, which came out the same year. That year with Philip Seymour Hoffman playing Capote and, winning an Oscar, and then this other movie comes out where he's doing the exact same thing, which is unfortunate or badly timed. But so with The Girl, which is basically the unofficial sequel to Hitchcock, as it's about the filming of The Birds, the film that he made after Hitchcock, that film does highlight the kind of the obsessiveness that Hitchcock had with his blonde characters. In that case, it's Tippi Hedren in that film, who's played by Sienna Miller. And while it's interesting to kind of note that darker aspect of Hitchcock, or his kind of eccentricities that make him weirder in a mean-spirited sort of way, the film's not very entertaining, and it may be just because the film's not that well made necessarily, as opposed to someone else maybe could have taken it to a better level, or if it was a theatrical feature, maybe it would have had a better handle on how to make it. But regardless, I did have more fun watching this Hitchcock film because, yeah, it's made to be more fun, but I don't know, I guess I was able to look past the fact that it wasn't being more, wasn't delving deeper into the Hitchcock persona.
Yeah, and I think I'm just being super negative right now about it, because when I was watching it, I definitely laughed more than a handful of times, and I remember, a plastered grin on my face at some of the in-jokes, and I very much enjoyed all the scenes between Alma and Hitch, because to me, the meat of the film are the scenes between those two characters, and that's actually what I think the film could have focused on a little bit more, is their relationship, because to me, there were true stakes in their relationship and whether they would maintain a certain amount of intimacy or not. And watching that and going on that journey was pretty, I don't know, I liked that part of it. It was exciting.
For sure. And I think, yeah, because I certainly don't think it's a perfect film by any means. I don't think it's a great film, but I do think it's a good movie. And I think, yeah, it could have been, if it wasn't so, if the movie didn't have Psycho as its backdrop and just had, if it was a story that was, the main focus was on the Hitchcock-Alma relationship, which it kind of is, although it's basically a back and forth between that and Psycho. If it was just on the relationship aspect and they fleshed that out more and had Psycho way more in the background, then maybe the movie would have been better. And at the same time, if it was about the making of Psycho and just had the relationship aspect as kind of a sub thing, which you easily could have done as well, it could have been better as well. I know that the producers, whatever, could not get the Hitchcock estate did not allow them to go as deep into Psycho as I guess they maybe could have wanted to. So that's why you don't get to see a lot. That's why there are a lot of changes, and you don't get to see like the Bates Motel, for instance, and there's certain aspects that don't occur the way you thought they would. But so that does hold the film back, I guess, from exploring more of the making of Psycho aspect. But
that makes perfect sense, actually, because it felt like the film was almost wanting to be more inquiring into Hitchcock, but there was something stopping it, and I can totally see that now. And the lack of energy of the film, I think, could be attributed to that as well.
Yeah, and that. Yeah, it's that kind of thing where I can tell that, and I could tell that before because there was a Q&A after my screening, and I figured that out before I even heard that fact. I'm like, clearly they could not get like the rights to certain aspects because there's certain things here that I'm like, that's just not true, or that's just, why am I not seeing this? Why am I not seeing the Bates Motel in a movie about the making of Psycho? Right. And another thing that kind of got me, because I know, like, there's the shower scene, the famous shower scene of Psycho, and they show that in this film. And I'm like, I'm aware that scene took, like, 3 days to film. And that was a very intensive scene to make. And in this film, it just shows it from a completely different perspective, because it's focused on Hitchcock's own personal troubles and how he's basically taking that out in the filming of that scene. And so it gets done in, like, a matter of minutes. And I'm like, that's not right. That's not how they made that scene. So it's like, yeah, it's little things like that do make the film lesser than it could have been. And yeah, the fact that, like this, I know this film, it's based off a book it's called Alfred Hitchcock and the Making of Psycho. I think that's the name of the book. And like, so it's adapted from that, but it still feels like it's basically taken like a Cliff Notes version of that just to kind of appropriate the story of Psycho in this film, but then it turns into this relationship drama. And so as it stands, yeah, it doesn't quite get to encompass all of these facts. It just has a couple of those things with highlights going to the relationship portion as opposed to what I guess what I imagine some people are more hoping for is a appropriate look at the filming of Psycho via these amazing actors that they've brought into play.
Yeah, and I think as a last note, when we interviewed Richard Portnow on Just Seen It, I asked him what it was like working with the director, and I can never pronounce his name right, but it's Sasha Gervasi, is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. The director of Anvil, the story of Anvil, which is a great documentary.
The coolest documentary in the world. Like, I am such a huge fan of that. I went to a screening of Anvil with Anvil there performing live, awesome. And I died. It was so awesome. And so coming from documentary and having seen Anvil, I thought, well, I'm nervous that maybe Sasha was a little bit shy in the directing of this film, and maybe, it was stacked with these high profile actors, and maybe that's why he didn't want to tackle the issues or be as discerning about Hitchcock because he's, coming from an outside genre. But I knowing what we do know now, what you're saying about the Hitchcock estate and things like that and their source material, I think I have wrongfully blamed Sasha Gervasi for his tentativeness as a director, and most likely it had nothing to do with my qualms of the film.
I will say the film, even though it didn't have the ability to do certain things it maybe would have liked to have done if it had the approval of the Hitchcock estate. I will say that the film, it does look a little TV at times. It does feel kind of less a big theatrical feature, more of the caliber of an HBO special, for instance.
It's the energy. I think it's that it doesn't have any punch. And I thought the music was and I don't know how much time we have, but I thought the music could have been used or employed a lot better to create more punch and more excitement in the storyline. And instead it did diverge to a more, what you're saying, a more television feeling.
Sitcom-y kind of vibe. Yeah. So yeah, those are just elements that take it down for me. And again, I do like the film. It has a lot of things that I think are notable to make it lesser than a film that's trying to encapsulate the legacy of Hitchcock, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like we keep apologizing for not loving it because it's about someone so awesome, and there were so many great things about it. But regardless, it just didn't hit it out of the park.
Well, I feel like I apologize because I know that I'm a Hitchcock fan. I know a lot about him, so I feel like me liking this film is almost like not necessarily a great thing because of how many things it changes, but I did have fun with it. So it's like this weird balance of like, I did have fun watching this movie, even though I know it's inaccurate in a lot of scenarios. But yeah, so.
Cool.
All right, so we have our scale of when you should go and see this movie. Our scale is from IMAX to theater to dollar theater, HBO, TV, or just kind of forget about it. Liz, where would you put Hitchcock on that scale?
You know, even though I'm a cranky McCrankerson, I do think just seeing it in the theater is, I would say seeing it in the theater. Oh, don't see it opening night, but wait a few weeks and see what the buzz is about.
That's like a dollar theater, then.
Is that a dollar theater?
That'd be like a dollar theater rating, yeah.
How about like the $2 Pasadena Academy Theater?
There you go.
Okay.
I would give it a dollar theater rating as well. But cool. All right. So that's our thoughts on Hitchcock. Liz, where can people find more of your work?
Hey, they can watch me on Just Seen It every Saturday at 6 p.m. on PBS KOCE, or they can go to www.justseenit.com, or they can go to LizManashil.com and check out all about my movie that I'm doing.
All about that movie. All right. Great, cool. Thank you, Liz, for joining me to talk about Hitchcock.